Hey, welcome to another episode of the InNOLEvation Mindset Podcast, powered by the Jim Moran College of Entrepreneurship. I am Mark McNees, your host. And in studio today, we have Michael Ciccarelli-Walsh, and he is a publisher, self-publisher, and author. Michael, thank you for coming in today. And hey, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from and just kind of your background.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. And thank you for that pronunciation, because Ciccarelli is a tricky one.
Wait, I got some good coaching.
Happy to help. I'm a local author in the Tallahassee area, an FSU alum, and I started writing back when I was an FSU student and have been producing books ever since. So I've published 3 and a fantasy sci-fi series. I recently published a new children's novel, and I'm just excited to get the word out about these books.
I know, I'm pretty excited. You just are going to hold it up for the camera here. Now it's backwards for me, so can you read it for me?
Yes. It is Gabatha the Green Bean, written by Michael Ciccarelli-Walsh and illustrated by Ariana Nicholas.
Very nice. Let me hold it up here in this beautiful book, and it's signed for me right in the front there. You can see that. So tell us about we'll start here. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration of Gabatha the Green Bean.
Well, Gabatha, it's a funny story. So the inspiration was actually from my girlfriend, Gabby.
Okay.
I had already been writing novels, not children's books or picture books, but longer, fleshed out novels about superheroes and fantasy and fantastical things. Naturally, what you do is when you know an author, you're like, okay, what's my character going to be? That was her question to me. I think we were in a Barnes & Noble at the time, and we started spitballing. Gabatha was a nickname her best friend gives her. It's like a pet name. And so we were like, it's got to be Gabatha something. And then we played around with it till we got Green Bean. And I'm like, okay, so obviously this is a children's book now. It's going to involve a farm and vegetables, and we'll go from there. And it was just a joke until her birthday was rolling around last year, and she's like, to see Gabatha brought to life. So
that's fun.
Yeah, I was like, challenge accepted. I sat down in front of a blank page. I'm like, what do I write about? And I was like, let me just write about her. And so I wrote her story of basically being from small town Tallahassee. In the story, it's a farm. She's not from a farm, but it fit the veggie sort of theme there.
Okay.
And the main character doesn't feel like she fits in the small town, moves out to the big city, wants to be a fashion designer. In real life, she had moved out to New York. And in real life, she moved back to Tallahassee during COVID because it didn't make sense to stay there. Obviously, we didn't want to put COVID in the kids' books, so we just said, like, she was having trouble out there, feeling lonely, feeling like she didn't have her place. And so the moral of the story is she learns to tap into her roots, and that's what helps set her apart from others, helps her find her own voice and her own identity and her own brand identity, and feels more whole, bridging the gap between her, where she came from and where she is now.
Okay, great. And when did you release this book?
I released it about a month ago, early August 2025. Right.
So where are you selling? Are you selling on your own personal website? Or are you selling through Amazon? What's your distribution channels?
Totally. You can find them all on my website, www.ciccarelli-walsh.com, but they all link out to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and we've placed them in a lot of local bookstores. So Hearth & Soul has a section with this in the children's section. We've placed them I have a free copy at Black Dog Cafe down the street. If you go in there, it's in the reading section. A couple bookstores in town, like My Favorite Books, will carry them. My books are popping up all around those little hole-in-the-wall shops around town.
Oh, very cool. So you said you got into writing while you were at FSU, is that correct?
Correct. And funny enough, I was excited that it was going to be in WJB, our interview, because it all started right next door in Landis Hall. Okay.
Very cool. What was your major and what prompted you to start writing? And tell us about your first book that you did write.
Yeah, so I started writing a little bit before I started the digital media production program here. I started that my second year, but I was writing a lot my first year just for fun. I was writing scripts with the dream of one day being the next like Steven Spielberg or something. Mm-hmm. And so as I was writing and building out these scripts, I started to learn more about the production world through the DMP program. And so the more I learned about it, the more I learned that like everybody in it, you find your own area of production. That's why all this stuff seems very familiar to me. I'm used to being behind the camera and not in front of it. So some people really like being behind the camera. Some like being in front. Some like doing the costume design. Some like doing the editing and the post-production type stuff. For me, I was always drawn to the writing part, and I noticed that no one else in the class was. to the point where one of my writing professors in the program, there's like one writing class you take. And I was like, oh, I'm so excited for this. And everybody else was like, oh, no, I don't want to do this class. I just want to get back to editing. I was like, oh, really? That's like my least favorite part. So that sort of set for me like where my interests and my talents lied. Was I realized I'm on the writing side, so let me keep doing that. And so I started writing scripts, and eventually as I was writing it and learning more about production, I realized it's really hard to get your work produced in general, but especially in the fantasy sci-fi spaces, which is where I lean toward. I was writing like superheroes in space. Marvel movies, they're still popular. They were very popular when I was a student about 10 years ago.
Okay.
And that was like the industry standard. I'm like, I love to do that, but with my own characters, my own spin. So that's why I created. So as I'm writing these scripts and realizing like, this may never take off or anything, I said, but what if it started with a book? Because then I can always say this was my thing. I wrote it, I completed it. And if somebody maybe down the road ever picked it up and turned it into a film or show or something, I'd be very excited if that happened. But I can at least say I finished it and I have a piece that people can read and enjoy the characters that I've enjoyed so much creating and writing about.
You primarily fiction and sci-fi and stuff like that. You have a series too, right?
Correct.
And what series is that?
I call it the Zoro series. Zoros being the term that they give all the superpowered individuals in this galaxy.
Okay.
A galaxy far away.
Okay. And tell us a little bit more about like the series and where the idea came from and how it's developed as you've been writing it.
Totally. It started, and so those scripts that I was writing did end up becoming it. It was an amalgamation of things I enjoyed. Star Wars, I loved X-Men comics for characters where the superheroes don't feel super in the eyes of the society. They don't revere them with capes and parades. They think of them as like the outcasts. They're the underdogs. And I love that idea of somebody so superpowered being the underdog. And a big inspiration for that really, and a lot of people wouldn't know this reading a fantasy sci-fi series, but a big inspiration was West Side Story. It was when I was in high school, that was one of my volunteer things to get my bright futures, was I would be on the sort of in the rehearsals, like behind the scenes, like helping run music and just helping out around the sets and things like that. So my brother was in the show and I got to know it. What's that?
Oh, we're doing good.
Okay. Gotcha. So I got to know the story of West Side Story very well, and I always thought to myself, how can I make it so that what would happen if I took this sort of idea of these two rival gangs fighting each other and bring it into a fantasy sci-fi space? And that's where I got an idea for my first book, which was called Trouble in the Floating City. So it was this idea of city that floats, all the buildings float independently. It seems like this cool tourist attraction type place in this galaxy, but there's this hidden feeling of danger of if you fell through the chasm. So these gangs are chasing each other, and what happens when you fall through the chasm? So that was like the impetus. And then I started playing with the idea more, and I said, what if there was one character that had superpowers and he could beat everybody in the fight, but he couldn't use them for some reason? So what was that reason? What powers does he have? Who else is in this world? Who else might have powers? And that became what turned into an entire series. And so now I'm 3 books in and working on the 4th and final installment in that series.
Oh, that's really exciting. One geeky thing about me is, so I can't turn my brain off at night. So I have Audible, the service, and basically all I listen to is sci-fi fantasy books to help me go to sleep. I've listened to hundreds of books. I put the little timer on for 30 minutes, and if I wake up during the night, I'll hit it again, and then I'll back up if I fall asleep. And so I'm actually a huge fan of sci-fi and fantasy, and especially adventure sci-fi and stuff like that. Are any of your books on Audible yet? Have you made that leap?
Great question. So not yet. It's going to be, we're working on the audiobook now, so I don't know exactly when we're going to have it finished. But funny enough, it's a current student who I recruited who's got a really good voice for it, who's been slowly working on it in between classes. I don't have a date on that yet, but we're hoping to get the first book out as soon as we can. And that's always been the toughest part because that's the most expensive. When you build a book, the paperback's pretty easy, the ebook's pretty easy to produce, and just the actual writing part. But the audiobook usually is the most expensive part. So that's been so I'm finally at a point where I'm like, okay, now I can afford to like take a chance on trying to get this out on Audible.
No, that's super cool. So as you know, that I've played around and I've published a couple of books and actually just published my 3rd book. It's called The CEO Mindset Reset. And it's actually a big change from my previous 2 books, were more spiritual in nature. But the common theme in all the books is like being your best self and things like that. The CEO Mindset Reset it's essentially a daily reflection. It takes minutes, like just to get your mind right and everything, which has been a helpful thing for me, is just spending a little bit of time. And that's been a theme in my life is like people are like, how did you find time to become an author? And I said, you know how you become an author? One sentence at a time. And if you write a sentence every day, eventually you got a book, and you just keep on going and doing it. What's been your experience in your writing process? And is there an overarching theme personally that you convey or comes out through your writing?
That's a great question. And you bring up a great point. I think a lot of people think there's some magic sauce to writing a book. Like, how does that happen? How does it? I'm like, you guys have all been writing your whole life, whether it was for school or whatever. So it is that consistency. And so for me, it was about getting a really good habit going. And I learned that when I was in college. So in college, I would have like my class schedule drawn out on a piece of paper that I put on the wall, and I would have the time. So I'm like in class here, and then there's a gap here, and that's writing time. And then this is club meeting time, and then other class or something. And so each day I would try to chunk out 1 or 2 hours, and I try to keep that habit going even in my working life, working full time at FSU. So I know 8 to 5 is pretty locked in. And so what I would do the last couple of years I've been working here is 5 to 8 o'clock. That would be my kind of relaxation time. That'd be time to get dinner, take a nap, go to the gym, call family, whatever I wanted to do to decompress from the day. 8 o'clock until 11, or eventually until whenever I fell asleep, would be my writing time. That used to be the schedule, and it worked really well. Now it's a little harder to have a full brain, I think. I know maybe it's just getting older. Like when I was 22, it was easy to go till 2 a.m., no problem. Right. Not so much anymore. So I pivoted. Now I try to do it early in the morning. I'll just set an early alarm. I'll get up and make my coffee at 5 a.m. and just start writing until it's time to work.
Yeah, that's actually has become my process. Is I find just getting older that I'm just wiped at the end of the day, and I'm ready to consume, not create. And so I've gotten in the habit of waking up at 4:30 or 5 before the house wakes up, and then I have a solid hour or two where I can sit and write and different things like that. And obviously I'm writing nonfiction, kind of self-help books and things like that. But I've always been fascinated and wanted to like write a nonfiction book, but it seems so daunting to me.
To me, nonfiction be the hard part because I understand it comes from, it's all real stuff, but trying to amalgamate that all together, whereas I love the organic, just like it can go wherever it wants. No one dictates it. That was part of why I liked making my own superhero characters. The big complaint with every superhero film was, hey, that went against the comic books. That went against the source material. I'm like, I'm a source material. If I say this person died, they dies. If something changes, I can control that within my universe. That level of freedom is a lot of fun, but also intimidating too, because it's, where does it come from? Where does it go? And I found that having a writing group actually helps a lot with that. A lot of times when I'm stuck, I'm not sure where to go, they give me ideas and feedback that help keep me on that right path to getting to the end.
Yeah, that's one thing that I used to have a writing partner for my first 2 books every Friday we would meet. I would write, I would send him everything I wrote that week, and then Friday we would meet for coffee, and then we would talk through it. And that was really helpful to that process. And then he moved to Nashville, and then I didn't write again for 10 years. Yeah, it's just, yeah, really. But he was a fantastic sounding board to me, learning and finding new people to help me that I feel like I can share that unfinished work with. I was having dinner with friends the other night because I'm working on a book right now, and I completed it and had it send it to an editor, and they said it's good, but it's choppy. And I'm like, okay, I don't want good but choppy. And so I sat down and I rewrote the first 3 chapters. And when I was at dinner last night with some friends that had invited us over there, we were talking about the book. It just came out, and he was excited about it. I said, I'm actually working on this. And I told him this, kind of what it's about and things like that. And he's like, could I read the first 3 chapters? And I'll give you feedback. And I'm like, yeah, that would be awesome. And then my wife said, can I read the first 3 chapters? And I'm like, absolutely not. And she sat on it last night. And then this morning, that was the first question when she came downstairs was like, so why can you send it to a friend, but you can't, you don't want me to see it? And I said, honestly, I care too much of what you think. And I want you to see the finished product. I don't want to show you something that's not polished and not ready.
And so personal too.
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
your baby and you're in that incubator stage. You're not ready for it to come out and see the world yet.
Yeah. And it's just, so I don't know if she bought it or not, but it is true. I don't know, like in your writing process and stuff, there's some people that I'm more willing to show the unfinished work to and take the feedback. And then there's other people like my wife or even some close friends and even some colleagues who I respect a lot, but I would never show them the sausage making in the process.
It was such, even just to like when I've been writing for a while before I published my first book, even to make that announcement that I had a book that was ready to publish. I learned the process. I'm like, I can do this, but only a handful of people had known that I was writing, and only an even smaller handful had ever gotten a chance to peek at it. And even just to get past that mental hurdle of, oh, nobody's going to care, they're not going to like it, what's that going to be like, was probably that first hurdle to go through. But even now, having written a few, I've learned that it's also important to be careful who you share it with early, because you don't want to mess up your creative mojo if you're getting the wrong kind of feedback. If I like it with other writers who more understand the craft or are comfortable with it rather than the average fan, they'll let you know if they don't like something, but they may not have the solution for how to fix it.
Yeah. And that's entrepreneurship. And I work in the College of Entrepreneurship, and with entrepreneurs, they have this fragile, unformed idea. And it does matter who they share it with, because most people say, oh, that'll never work, or, oh, nobody will ever, they'll just crap on it. And it could be discouraging. And being careful, okay, hey, this is not ready to, this is a bird not ready to fly. I'm not saying it is, but maybe it could fly. And maybe there's an idea here that is going to resonate with people and it's going to matter. Did you ever, I remember I was really afraid before I released my first book that people were going to be like, who the hell do you think you are writing a book?
Well,
Did you go through imposter syndrome? Did you go through anything like that?
Absolutely. I had friends who I was so nervous that night when I was going to post it on Facebook, because at this point I had at least sent it to an editor, and I was so terrified to do that, but he was really helpful and really constructive with his criticism, to the point where I felt stronger as a writer. I'm like, oh wow, this guy in the professional world liked it, and that gave me a little bit of a boost because I wasn't expecting that. And so I was really nervous that I would have to rewrite the whole thing, and that wasn't the case. There were things to fix for sure, but it could stand on its own two legs and start to run. And so when I realized I might have something here, like it made a connection with this person, and I had fielded it with a few close friends who were also getting into it and wanting like the next chapters, which had kept me motivated through the process to keep writing, keep churning out other chapters so they could read them. So when I got to that point, I knew I had something that could be special, but then you're really scared. What if the rest of the world doesn't think it's special? What if it's rejected? What if people think you're weird or nerdy or whatever, which it's the nerdiest genre you could be in. But eventually I learned to embrace it. But that first night when I was going to post it on Facebook with the cover art that had been designed by a professional artist and everything, I'm like, what's this going to do? And it remains still to this day my most popular post I ever put out.
Really?
And the amount of people reaching out, and people will say crawling out of the woodwork. I hate that term, but people I hadn't heard from in a while who they felt motivated. That's so cool. I need to reach out to Michael. People I hadn't heard from in maybe 10, 15 years from school or from college, just saying, this is so awesome. Let us know where we can buy it. What's your process? Or people like, I want to write too. And I was so amazed like how many people also want to write, also are writers, actively either produce books or want to produce books. So that was a really special moment. And when I realized that I was, especially because it was 2020 when I put it out, and part of the reason I was able to finish was that, not really much of a social life at that point, couldn't go anywhere. So I'm like, I have this time now. Let me try and finish this thing I had started a few years before. And so I did. And I think it was, especially given that timing of being late 2020, a lot of people were really down. And so having this one thing where they could all say, hey, Michael wrote a book. They like one positive. I'm going to read this book. And they had the time too. It was around the holiday season. And I just remember that moment of excitement. And it was kind of like getting a first car, like it'll never come back, but getting that first test copy of the book in the mail and getting feedback from friends and messages, that was really special. And so anytime I'm a little down or a little, getting that imposter syndrome, I just remember that moment and saying, no, people are riding on this. They're excited to follow this journey with me. I'll hear from people I see around FSU that I work with all the time say, hey, I may get 5 likes on something. I didn't think anybody saw it, but they saw it and they'll tell you in person, that's so cool that you went to that convention or were selling books at that store or that you're launching a new book. And so that you feel a little more justified. Okay, people are paying attention to this and they do care.
Yeah, it always blows me away. My first book I wrote, it was over 10 years ago. And I actually wrote it, I was getting my doctorate at the time, and it was a subject that I really cared about, but the dissertation process took all the life out of it. And I'm like, once I got my bound dissertation, it went on a shelf. I never even opened it because I hated it so much, just what it had become. And I felt I had to redeem it somehow and tell the story how I wanted to tell it, because my university wouldn't let me. It had to be, they had to kill the life out of it, but it's an academic work, and that's not who I am. And I created this book that was basically a metaphor for life based on my swim from Alcatraz Island and just swimming as a metaphor for life. And that redeemed it. And it's funny, just a month ago, I was on Landis Green and somebody walked up to me and said, "Are you Mark McNees? I read Immersion." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's nuts." I guess this is a weird way to say it, but the shelf life of a book is pretty long. So your first book that you put out, how long was it until you came out with your second book?
Between the first and second, it was the longest span of time I had between two books. I think it was late 2020, so it was December, and then the next one came out January 2023. In the interim, I got a new job. I finished grad school, so I was doing other things. So I wasn't actively writing all the time, but I was also there was like this UCLA screenwriting online program where you met in the evenings, which evening Pacific time, I was up late those nights, but it was fun because you get basically a class that's your writing group with the professor to guide the conversation. Okay. So you get used to not only story and structure and writing, but also taking criticism and workshopping together and reading each other's work and coming up with solutions to things. That was the most valuable experience I could get. And once I got a better understanding of that story structure and the revision structure and how to work with the team, that's when I then formed a writing group for fantasy writing that I met here in town and started really working on and polishing the second book. I had a draft of it before I started the UCLA program, but then when I finished it in like mid-2022, that's when I said, okay, I've got the tools. I'm going to take this first draft. I'm going to do a full rewrite with everything I know and reorder and restructure everything that needs to be restructured and put it out. It was about 2 years, and a little change between those first two books. And then the next book came out about 1.5 years later. And then this children's book has been a nice little in between until I can finish up book 4. So that's been in the works for a couple months now. So let me ask you just like some in the business kind of questions. One question that I got a lot, and I'll just ask you, why did you choose to self-publish versus going with a publisher? That's a great question. I worked a lot in marketing. I had been marketing for the graduate school here at FSU, and then later on, I now work at the College of Communication and Information, handling a lot of their marketing. So I was pretty comfortable with marketing itself. So that was already like half the battle, because if you go through a traditional publisher, and not to knock it, because there's people who do that, you have to not want to really do the business side very much, because they'll handle a lot of it. So much so that you might lose some creative control. You don't always get to pick your covers. You don't always get to get your final say on all the edits and things like that. So I already knew what I thought would work based on my marketing background, what could sell, what would look good. So I trusted my instincts there. And the other part of it was I had met a self-published author who happened to live in my apartment complex. And I caught him one day when he was taking out his trash at the dumpster. And I ambushed him with questions. And the poor guy was so nice. He spent like a half hour just talking me through all the steps and breaking it down in a way that made it feel really feasible. Like it wasn't this big daunting task to take this work that I had been building for so long and get it to the publishing side. He was basically showing me the hard part's over. You could get it published now, because at that time I was just querying to agents, and you never know when you're going to hear back on that. Right. And so he said, don't waste your time. Go get the business experience of just putting it out there. Here's what you got to do. Just find a professional editor online, find an artist online, get your ISBN online. It can all be done in a matter of days or weeks, and that's all it took. And that's when I had that magic moment of, I guess I'm posting this on Facebook now because it's ready. And so I realized also that the traditional publishers, they don't really put much marketing dollars into it anyway. They're focused on their J.K. Rowlings and their Stephen King, their James Patterson. You're still like third, fourth fiddle. So I realized I already know the marketing. I already have the book. Let's just do it. And I'm really glad that I had that let's do it attitude, because now with each book, I'm like, hey, it's done. Let's keep the ball rolling.
No, that's great. Yeah. Do you know who Seth Godin is?
I do not.
He's an author and marketing genius guru, and he self-publishes all his own books. And I'm a I follow Seth and what he says. Basically what you said is what he said. And I got my bachelor's in marketing. That's what I did a lot of my life, as it was doing marketing. And now, and in the past, distribution was why you really needed a publisher. But Amazon and Barnes and Noble and everybody there's distribution out there. So for me, it made a lot more sense to be able to hold on to like the creative process. And it was like, nobody's going to be more passionate about marketing this book than me. And so getting out there and doing it. So tell me if you're comfortable, tell me, and I'll tell you about your sophomore experience, your second book versus your first book. You said that your first book, that post is still the post that got the most engagement and things like that. What happened with book 2 versus book 1?
I think book 2 was the realization that even though structurally, creatively, it was a stronger book. And those who have read it say the same. They're like, wow, like they liked 1, but they're like, man, 2 was like, that was like full stride. It was an improvement at a technical level. And so I'm always proud of that. In terms of a sales level, I think there was and not that the first one got all that crazy sales anyway, but I think there was that novelty factor. Like I said, with getting your first car, you get the second, third car, it doesn't mean the same thing as that first car. And it's the same with the books. And so I realized, okay, this isn't just, oh wow, magic day, Michael's got a book again. You have to really sell it each time. So then I really had to think about my sales strategy and not just the novelty of having a book out, but now saying like, why should people want to continue the series? Why should people be excited for this kind of stuff? And so I've never quite seen a day one quite like I have like the first day I launched the first book, but I have seen in learning the industry where to go to find like the new readers and what places and spaces, because to just lean on friends and family, that can only go so far. Your circles are only so wide where you want to be, because a lot of them may not read the genre. And I've had so many friends who pick up the book and it goes on the shelf, and that's fine. Like 90% of books don't actually get read after being purchased. It's some metric like some crazy, it's some crazy metric like
that's depressing.
I know a little bit, it's, and I could say I could attest to that because I have such a long list of books in my house that are waiting to be read. But realizing like it's not just getting people to buy it, it's getting people to read it and talk about it and getting that word of mouth. That's the most important part. So I've since tried going to spaces like conventions and especially now with a kid's book, like places where like families will be with little kids to sell that to for all the nerds out there. Those cosplay conventions. I just came back from one last weekend.
Fun.
So this time a few days ago, I was standing there like giving my pitch to a bunch of people in costumes, and anyone with a Star Wars outfit or a Marvel outfit. I'm like, you're my guy.
Come over here. I got a book for you.
Exactly. And so finding the channels where that will work, because like your main channel to your family, friends, like it's great, they'll support you, but it's not their genre, or they may not even really be readers. And I hear so many people say, man, if I had the time. No,
that's interesting. My experience was very similar. My first book, I had no idea what I was doing. I had the disaster of actually publishing the wrong manuscript. It wasn't,
that is like my worst nightmare.
It was a nightmare.
I almost did that once. I had uploaded the wrong thing on building, I think it was book 3, and I caught it before it happened, but yeah.
Yeah, so the book came out, and then instantly I knew. I was getting feedback from people like, why? And I'm like, we edited that out. Wait a second. And realized through all the back and forth, we messed up on a version number and uploaded the wrong book. We caught it very quickly. Fortunately, we were able to switch it out really quickly, but it was embarrassing, to say the least. And the funny thing is, though, the book went on to be a success, and
it's awesome.
And then the second book, which went really smooth and everything, and like barely anybody bought it or read it or really cared about it. I was just wondering your experience on that. One thing, are you on Kindle as well?
The 3 books in the superhero series are on Kindle Unlimited. So you can get it on Kindle just as an ebook, or you can, if you're in the Kindle Unlimited sort of subscription package, you can access them essentially for free. You pay for the subscription, but then you can read them for free, at least for now, because I haven't distributed the ebook to other places. It's just exclusive to Amazon, so it can stay there, versus the paperbacks you can get in a couple different vendors and things like that.
Yeah, I haven't done this for a while, but one thing that I geeked out on and really loved was looking at the Kindle version of my book, and I could see like how many people highlighted something. 360 people highlighted this sentence, and I'm like, how cool is that? Like,
That's
and you don't
awesome.
get that kind of feedback with a regular book. You have no idea if you hit somebody's heart or something resonated with something with somebody. And then Goodreads, I think, is really a great service too, how they put out quotes like from your books and things like that. Maybe different with fiction than it is with nonfiction. I don't know. What's been your experience?
That's really cool. You had that experience. Probably coming from being a Christian nonfiction story, probably empowered a lot of people. So I don't know if I've gotten like the quotes necessarily. It's more just what people say about the story. So a lot of times for fiction, a lot of people want to talk about their favorite character. And that's always so interesting because you get a little lens into their life, into what resonates with them. Some people like the really hot-headed character who always does everything wrong because he bullheads his way through. Some people like the really reserved character. Some people like the smart aleck character. And it's fun to see how each person like connects with different characters in different arcs. And so hearing their favorite parts, their least favorite parts, that's always fun for me because I can funnel that into my next book and say, okay, people really resonated with that. So let's see if we can tug on that thread. And, that didn't really work for people. So how can we rework it in the next one to make it better?
Okay. Are you doing any RPG lit stuff or?
Actually, no, I'm not. It's funny because in the fantasy space, that's really big right now.
It's very big.
And everybody in my writing group, and I think a big reason why is a lot of people poured over from Dungeons & Dragons, tabletop type games into fantasy because they're already coming up with fantasy worlds and things. And then just now all you need is just a story to thread the line through all your crazy alien races and monsters and magic that you've already created. I haven't done that myself, but a lot of people in my writing group at least read from that area, if not maybe play a little bit with bringing their Dungeons and Dragons type stuff into the writing.
Okay, interesting. Have listened to a lot of RPG lit and have burnt out on it because it seems like it's all the same. I'm like, okay, you're going to level up. And so I'm trying to find non-RPG. That's for the audience. RPG is role-playing game literature, but for short, it's RPG lit is a new genre. And playing with monsters or...
It could have monsters. I feel like...
No, the title. What's the big series that... Is it Fighting with Monsters or...
I don't know that one.
Okay.
The only one I'm really familiar with is Dungeon Crawler Carl, which is a bit of a satire of lit RPG, but I heard people like... Okay.
Yeah, that one's fun. One thing I do about sci-fi literature and RPG lit is the humor. I want something lighthearted and silly and goofy, so that definitely scratches that itch. And that's one thing I really like about the fantasy genre is you can do anything, right? And it can, I think Dungeon Crawler, didn't he like lose all his hair at the beginning? And
I think so. And there's like a talking cat. I haven't read it, but I'm familiar.
Yeah, there is a talking cat who's like really sarcastic and things like that. So it's fun. And it's been really good for me. Just kind of takes me out of my like heavy world of I got to get this done and I got this. I'm listening to a sarcastic cat like making offhanded jokes.
And I feel like people like mistakenly write off fantasy and sci-fi that way, that it's too escapist, like they want something more grounded or more real. But it's like, despite all the fantastical stuff, a lot of times it's some of the best ways for us to process what's happening in the real world. It's an evil empire, but it represents things that we've seen throughout history, or it's a dark magic that curses people, but you can attribute that to maybe something like addiction or something that's very tangible in the real world and very scary. But it gives us a lens through which to look at it that's both fun and inviting, but also can make us think of it maybe from a different perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Let me switch gears because you and I both just put out a book and switch genres that people know us for. And I've gotten some feedback of people who've bought my new book who they're like, it's not Christian. It's not, it doesn't have that. And it's a leadership book. It's a book to motivate people in mindset and stuff like that. you even went further. All the way.
At least yours was nonfiction, right?
At least mine's nonfiction, and it's still in the theme of motivating people, inspirational and stuff like that. It doesn't have the Jesus part in it. But yeah, you went from space to a garden for children. What's your feedback been on that?
That's a good question. And it all started on a dare. I didn't expect to publish it. It was only after we saw the illustration. I should mention the illustrator, Ariana. She was an FSU student at the time she did that. I met her through our program, and she was so talented. I'm like, you want to give this a try? I've never tried veggies before. I'll give it a shot. But but with that whole book, I was just so impressed by it. I'm like, let's just see if this catches other people. And I think part of it was realizing how niche my market was. I found spaces and places to reach fantasy sci-fi fans, but they only represent a small portion of the reader market. When you compare like a best-selling book in fantasy sci-fi, maybe 50,000 copies.
Okay.
A best-selling romance, 500,000 copies. I was like, there's a big children's market out there. I'm like, I do have something people like. Let's tap into that. But the feedback's been, I think we positioned it okay, that like people were ready for it. I was like, I told everybody straight up like what the story was. So I think when they saw it on social media, like me explaining it in a video, then they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense that he would do something different. This seems fun. And I think for a lot of my friends and family who've been following, they're like, this is actually more like something we can digest, because a lot of my friends now are all in our late 20s, early 30s. So they're starting to have their own children or their own nieces and nephews to buy for. Their friends have kids that they can buy it for, or they're teaching school. A lot of them became school teachers and things like that, especially in elementary. So it was fun to play with something different. So the feedback generally hasn't been too much confusion about the pivot, but it's definitely been a bit of, I have been having trouble exactly finding all the right spaces and places, because when I go to a convention, I expected, because it's such a family-oriented event with lots of kids, that the parents would get really excited to buy for them. And what I'm learning at a lot of these places is that I'm still selling more of the fantasy sci-fi by a large margin, and it's because the people coming here aren't really buying for the kids, they're buying for themselves. And a lot of the feedback I get is, oh, my kid's just going to rip up that book. So I'm trying to find ways to convince people like, no, you should get it for the kid, because I think the coolest part about it is, unlike my other books that are a little harder to digest in the sense you can't read it all in front of me. You can only take a glance and hope that it like the first page is good enough that they'll keep going. But with Gabatha, you can read that book in front of me while you're at the booth and decide if you want to buy it for your kids or not, which is a little bit of the difference. People have been enjoying it, but I think the challenge now is making sure like I'm in the right places and selling it in the right way, that people are getting excited about it as they are this fleshed out series of 3 books that looks really enticing because it has like fun covers and big epic battles going on.
Right, exactly. No, that's interesting. Like just the marketing end of it. And I think it's like when I was running Red Eye Coffee, like I didn't necessarily like when I was trying to sell Red Eye Coffee, it didn't feel like it was like me in a sense, if that makes any sense. But when you're selling something that really came out of your heart and you wrote, and there, at least for me, if I want people to like it, because I feel like it translates, like if you don't like my book, maybe you don't like me or something like that.
It's always so personal.
Yeah,
right?
That's a much better way to put it. It's very personal. Do you feel the same way with sci-fi, or is it just something you're putting out and you don't feel connected to it?
No, I feel so connected to all of it. But I think, and I've had a lot of thought about like my personal brand, especially with publishing the new children's book, is what does my brand look like now that I have more of a spectrum? And so my hope is that like what I'm giving people are the stories that I would have wanted to read. The whole reason George Lucas made Star Wars is nobody ever made the movie I wanted to see. And I felt the same way about books. I had seen cool superhero books. I had seen cool movies books about outer space. I had never seen them quite blended together this way, and I wanted to create that world that people can really get wrapped into. But with Gabatha, I also wanted to tell a fun story for kids, and the books I was writing before are more young adults, so like teens, maybe preteens, it's accessible to depending on their reading level, but something for the little kids to read, and then as they get older, they can say, hey, he's got other books that are more for me now that I'm like 10, 12, 15 years old. So I looked at it more like this kind of spectrum, this kind of like age range where I'm like, okay, let me hit this group. And if I could come up with a middle grade book in the middle, that would be perfect. And try to create this conveyor belt of readers. Because like you said, it's all shelf life. Books are very long term. They may not sell that much today, but it could be worth something, hopefully before we die. They always say that after the artist dies, it becomes worth a lot. But hopefully people find them at some point. Maybe it's through a random TikTok thing that goes viral, or maybe it's just a matter of the right person ends up in the right person's hands and they take it off somewhere.
Yeah, I have a good friend, Doug Tatum, who wrote a book. I think 14 years ago, and it's, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the title right now. He's going to kill me. It's basically about jumping. It's a business book and about it's called No Man's Land, where it's you're no longer small, but you're not big company. And it's called No Man's Land. And I was talking to him the other day. I'm like, because he still to this day is doing keynotes on that book he wrote 14 years ago. And I was like, how did you market this thing? Like, how did it get out? And he said, one guy 14 years ago at Inc. magazine read it and liked it and wrote an article on it. And it changed everything. And he put his stamp of approval on it, and he's been living off it. He does other things too, but it's been going ever since. And that's really like interesting to me. Like, there's a lot of great books out there that nobody's ever read because it's just, there's so much content out there.
So much noise.
And so much noise. It's really hard to cut through. Like, when you think about that and you think about like, how do you cut through the noise? Do you have a strategy? Do you know what, besides going to the conferences and posting, and don't divulge any secrets if you don't want to, but like, how do you feel about that? Wow. How am I going to break through all this noise?
I've learned one strategy. I don't know what's going to be the winning recipe. I think part of it's just patience and time and effort. And so I always tell people, if they want to do this, don't do it for the money. Do it because you love the books. With the hope that, yes, you'll make the money back and you'll be able to do it full time someday. But even just to do it is a privilege and a pleasure. But I think when it comes to, sorry, I just blanked on that for a second. I was doing so well. But when it comes to trying to get the books out there, I think one other avenue that's helped is recognizing that sometimes it's better to give it out for free. I think a lot of people feel like if they pay for it and buy it from me, they're like, okay, I supported Michael, check the box, put it on the shelf, versus somebody who will actually go and read it. So if you give it to them for free, they're like, oh man, he gave it to me for free. Maybe I should read it and actually check it out. And that person's going to be more likely to be that brand advocate that goes and tells other people who then tell other people. And that's how you get that little virality thing going. I learned fairly recently to start giving them out for free. So especially with Gabatha out now, she's been a secret weapon. And, oh, you're an educator? Just take the book. Like, don't even pay me. Just here's a signed copy. I want you to go and take it to your kids and enjoy it. And so doing that has been getting a lot of, somebody just tagged me in a story post today because they had gotten it for their kid, and kid, they had the little sticker over the kid's face, but you see him reading it. And so that made me feel good that, hey, like, people are connecting with this material, and it's worth it only costs a couple bucks to order some author copies on Amazon, have them shipped in. It's worth it to just get it out there and get your name out there, and finding ways to tie it all back. So my QR is on the back of every single book. It takes them to a link tree, which has website on it, social media, links to the other books. It's all there. It's all easy. And that link is always editable. So if I have something new, like when this comes out, this will be on there so people know, hey, he was on a podcast. Let's see him. Because a lot of times I found like friends will be like, hey, let me help you sell it or something. Let me take these to a convention. I'll sell it for you. I'm like, don't waste your time. I'm like, it's only going to sell if they get to meet me and get a signature from me, because they're really buying from the person. I'm not a known name like Stephen King or something. There's no trust there yet. I have to develop that trust, and then they might buy my first book. And that's where I found like the most success is everywhere I go, I'll bring all 4 books, but people are either going to buy the first in the series and they buy Gabatha, and that's it. And then they'll come back later maybe and order online.
My telltale sign that an author has made it is when their name is bigger on the book than the title of the book.
Absolutely. So Stephen King, James Patterson, I'm coming for you.
Yeah, it's literally,
that's a cool metric.
When I see that, I'm like, okay, that's a legit author, that their name carries more than they're buying it just because Stephen King wrote it versus what he's actually writing about. It's the brand, right?
Yes.
And that brand, hopefully you get there. Hopefully I'll get there.
Hopefully you get there as well.
Someday. Yeah. You finished off this series. What's your BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal? Where do you want to see this going? What's success to you? What's your metric for success?
My metric would be, and especially because I've seen most success in the in-person selling, just letting people get to know me, it means driving out to different places, taking all the time to get there, to get set up, meet a few people, a handful are going to buy the book. So at the end of the day, you maybe break even. You paid for the gas and the inventory, and that's about it.
Like a musician.
Yeah. And so and funny enough, I grew up playing that game Rock Band. And that's the theme of the game, is that like you watch your band go from garage band that's barely getting enough money for lunch to them being big rock stars. So not that I want to be like a big rock star about it, but if I could see the online sales really start to take off in a way where it really becomes like a passive income, that I'm not actively having to go anywhere. I still will, but that I have some sort of like a foundation to stand on. Right now, my paycheck, my work, like that sustains me, and then the writing is still very much on the side. But I'm trying to change the mindset to be, okay, how do I get this to really launch into the stratosphere, or at least launch to a point where it can be sustainable? Because so many authors, we may not know their names, they may not be household names, or may not get the big print that we were talking about, but they at least are able to make like a living, like doing this day to day, week to week. And so if I could get to that point, if I get that point where online they're getting steady sales, enough people are talking about it and ordering new copies that like I can focus on writing the next book, that would be awesome.
That's really cool. So I appreciate you coming in, and I ask every guest, because we have a lot of students and entrepreneurs and aspiring writers who are listening to this podcast or watching this podcast and things like that. I always want to finish with this question. Michael, if you could go back before you wrote your first book and you were allowed to tell yourself one thing, what would you tell yourself?
In the course of our conversation, I had an idea in mind, but it changed just based on what we were talking about. And I think it's looking back, especially on like my experience these last couple months, really trying to sell these books in different places. My big thing would be looking back at that kid who wanted to be the next Steven Spielberg, tell him you don't have to do it alone. Because I think for so long I would get stressed that like, I'm not there yet. I'm not a best-selling author. I don't have my script sold, or I'm not making a movie. And to take that pressure off and say like, calm down, set your expectations appropriately, but also that you don't have to do it alone, that you have a support system and a team, not just to help sell books, but to just be somebody to talk to for advice, to seek out mentorship. I've worked at a university for 8 years now, and the best advice I've gotten has been from colleagues, mentors, bosses, people who around me who had ideas and looked at what I was doing and said, hey, here's how you can do the selling better. Here's how you can write better. Here's how you can market better. And absorbing that, and also just not being afraid to be like, hey, do you mind helping me out, set up for this event? And just the pressure that comes off from like somebody else showing up. They don't even have to do that much. Just the fact that they're there and there's somebody to talk to in the lulls when nobody's around, like walking by your booth, is really helpful. And so I would tell him, just relax and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. Because I was always the friend that was like trying to help everybody else, but then would be exhausted at the end of the day. And don't be afraid to ask for a favor, and then thank people accordingly for it.
Cool. That's a good word to end on. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. It's been awesome.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the InNOLEvation Mindset Podcast, powered by the Jim Moran College of Entrepreneurship. Hey, if you like this episode, be sure to share it with a friend and be sure to hit that subscription button so you never miss another amazing episode. We'll see you next time.